I stared at the projection screen, my pulse thudding against my ribs as Lily clicked to the next slide. The conference room lights dimmed, throwing her smug smile into sharp relief against the glowing charts behind her. There it was, my quarterly logistics report, dissected, color-coded, and corrected. Red circles highlighted supposed inefficiencies. Yellow boxes labeled critical errors. Green marks flaunted her improvements. As you can see, Lily began, her voice sugar-sweet but loud enough to echo off the glass walls. Mandy's procurement forecasts consistently deviated from standard modeling by an average of 14%. That's a major risk exposure for our supply chain integrity. I kept my expression still, though inside something twisted hard in my chest. She was doing it, using my own data, twisting my strategy into a story of failure. Around the table, 10 executives leaned in. A few nodded grimly. The CEO, her uncle, sat at the head, expression unreadable. Lily's clicker flashed again. When adjusted to traditional predictive models, the variances disappear completely, she said, gesturing to the side-by-side graphs. It's clear that Mandy's unconventional methods were not only inaccurate but potentially costly. We could have lost the entire Whitestone contract if we'd followed this model. I could practically feel the room turning against me, my colleagues avoiding eye contact, the COO whispering something to the CFO. My throat was dry, my hands folded carefully on the table to hide the tremor. 3 months of work, late nights refining logistics models that had saved the company millions last quarter. But none of that mattered now, because Lily, the CEO's ambitious niece with the perfect smile and endless charm, had found her moment. This analysis demonstrates the importance of returning to fundamentals, she said, addressing the room like she was lecturing a classroom. We need structure, not speculation. A few executives nodded approvingly. Someone even clapped softly. The humiliation burned through me, but I didn't flinch. Not yet. Lily paused for effect, flipping to her final slide. Moving forward, I recommend adopting my revised procurement protocol to prevent similar discrepancies. She smiled confidently. I've already begun implementation testing. Early results show a 12% efficiency improvement. Applause. Actual applause. The CEO, her uncle, smiled faintly. Excellent initiative, Lily. We need this kind of precision. The words hit like a blade. I sat there, silent, watching as she basked in the praise for work she didn't even understand. She had no idea why my numbers were different, or what they truly represented. Does anyone have questions? Lily asked, looking directly at me with feigned politeness. I felt every eye in the room shift my way. I smiled faintly. Not yet, I said softly. Please continue. She frowned slightly, expecting me to argue, to defend myself, to make a scene. But I didn't. I waited, because the moment she finished, she would be done. And I would only need one question. When the applause faded and the lights brightened, the CEO turned to me. Mandy, you've been quiet. Anything you'd like to add? I rose slowly, my palms flat against the polished table. My voice came out calm, almost casual. Just one question, I said, meeting Lily's bright, confident eyes. She tilted her head, a hint of mock sympathy crossing her face. Of course. I pointed at the final slide still glowing behind her. Can you explain why your so-called corrected model excludes the proprietary variable Whitestone's team specifically requested in their contract brief? The room went still. Lily blinked. I'm sorry. What variable? I stepped closer, my tone steady. The adaptive freight volatility coefficient. The one Whitestone's head of logistics demanded we integrate after last quarter's shipping delays. The one that made standard forecasting obsolete. A low murmur spread through the room. The COO frowned, flipping through his notes. Wait, he said slowly. Was that coefficient part of the initial scope? Yes, I replied evenly. I presented the integration plan in our kickoff meeting. Lily was there. She even signed off on it. Lily's confident expression faltered, just slightly. That adjustment wasn't finalized? It was finalized, I interrupted gently. In writing. It's the reason my models appeared to deviate from textbook standards, because they weren't meant to follow them. They were built specifically for Whitestone's adaptive network strategy. You just erased the very feature that secured our contract renewal silence. The CEO's jaw tightened as he glanced toward his assistant. Pull up the Whitestone project brief, he ordered quietly. As the assistant scrolled through documents, the color drained from Lily's face. Before the tension could break, I turned slightly toward the camera, my voice soft but deliberate. If you're already invested in this story, I said, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next when this boardroom turns into a battlefield. Because at that moment, I wasn't just defending my career. I was about to expose the rot beneath the company's polished surface and the price of blind loyalty to family over integrity. My name is Mandy. I'd spent 7 years building a reputation as the company's most reliable strategist, until the CEO's niece decided she could take it all with a PowerPoint and a smile. But she forgot one thing. I never play the loud game. I play the long one. And in the end, the truth always finds its way to the surface. The boardroom emptied slowly, leaving behind the faint hum of the projector and the heavy silence of embarrassment. Lily gathered her papers with trembling hands, her confident mask cracking around the edges. The CEO hadn't said another word after reading the project brief confirming exactly what I'd told them. That Whitestone's model required the adaptive freight volatility coefficient. He'd only said, "We'll discuss this further." Then he left. Lily turned to me, her tone tight and defensive. You could have clarified that earlier, Mandy. Instead, you let me walk into that blind. I met her gaze evenly. You presented my work as your own, Lily. If you'd asked instead of assumed, you wouldn't have walked in blind. Her mouth opened, then closed. She muttered something under her breath and stormed out, heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. When the door closed, I sat back down, exhaling for the first time in what felt like hours. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear anymore. From the quiet electric pulse of contained anger. The next morning, the office felt different. Conversations stopped when I walked past. People whispered, glancing up from their screens. A few of the analysts smiled subtly. The kind of smile that said we saw what you did yesterday. At my desk, my inbox was overflowing with messages. Some congratulatory, others cautious. One stood out from Director Hale, our COO. Mandy, impressive composure yesterday. Let's meet at 3 to review the Whitestone data models. CEO wants confirmation on all your figures before next week's renewal presentation. So that was it. No apology. No formal acknowledgement that Lily had just humiliated me in front of the entire executive team. But I didn't need one. The data spoke for itself. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that something wasn't over. At lunch, my colleague Jenna slid into the seat across from me in the cafeteria. You handled that like a pro, she whispered. Lily looked like she wanted to disappear. I smiled faintly. It wasn't about embarrassing her. I just needed the truth in the open. Jenna leaned in. Word is, her uncle's furious. Not just because she was wrong, but because it made him look careless. He vouched for her, remember? I paused mid-bite. He vouched for her? Personally. That's why she was even in that room. Jenna lowered her voice. He pushed for her to lead Whitestone after your first proposal. Said she needed exposure to high-level strategy. That's how she got access to your work. It hit me like a slow punch. So it hadn't just been Lily's ambition. It was nepotism, plain and simple. She'd been placed there to shadow me, not replace me. But she saw an opportunity, and she took it. And if her uncle had backed her publicly, he'd have every reason to protect her now. At 3 p.m., I walked into Director Hale's office, where he was reviewing charts on his monitor. Mandy, he greeted, motioning to the seat across from him. Let's walk through this together. For the next hour, I explained every adjustment I'd made for Whitestone's adaptive model. The algorithms, the reasoning, the backtesting that had confirmed the improvements. Hale listened carefully, occasionally nodding. When we finished, he leaned back and sighed. You know, it's ironic. Lily was so eager to prove herself that she nearly destroyed the account that made this company millions last quarter. She didn't understand the model, I said quietly. No, he agreed, and that's not entirely her fault. The CEO's been grooming her for leadership, but she doesn't have the technical foundation. She's more optics than substance. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Off the record, I'd suggest keeping your head down for a bit. You embarrassed her in front of her uncle, even if unintentionally. That doesn't go away easily in this place. I nodded slowly. You think there'll be consequences? He gave me a thin smile. Let's just say, family ties run deep around here. That evening, I stayed late in the office, double-checking datasets. The corridors were quiet, the glow from the city lights reflecting off the glass walls. Around 8 p.m., I received a message on our internal chat from an unknown user. You think you've won something? This isn't over. No name, no profile photo. But I didn't need one. Lily. I stared at the message for a moment, then closed the laptop. I could feel the anger behind those words. The entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. But what worried me more was the access. Anonymous internal messaging required admin clearance, which meant she still had privileges she shouldn't have. I sat back, the gears in my head turning. If Lily wasn't done, neither was I. The truth might have saved me once, but in this company, truth alone wouldn't be enough. Not when power protected incompetence. The next morning, the CEO called for a company-wide town hall. We'll be announcing a new project direction and leadership structure, his assistant wrote in the memo. When I read that line, a chill ran down my spine. Because I already knew what that meant. They weren't just cleaning up Lily's mess. They were preparing to rewrite the story entirely. One where I wasn't the hero who saved the Whitestone deal. But the problem with rewriting history is that it only works when the people who lived it stay silent. And I wasn't planning on staying silent anymore. The town hall started promptly at 10 a.m., and every employee packed into the atrium, murmuring as the CEO took the stage. He was a tall man with an air of practiced authority, the kind of confidence that didn't waver. Unless, apparently, his niece embarrassed him in front of the board. Behind him stood Lily, perfectly composed again, her polished smile back in place as if nothing had happened 2 days earlier. She stood slightly to the side, chin lifted, avoiding my eyes. Good morning, everyone. The CEO began. We've had some recent challenges, but also some tremendous opportunities. Today, I'm pleased to announce the restructuring of our analytics and procurement division. My stomach tightened. Restructuring. That word never came with good news. He continued. Going forward, Lily will be taking a leadership role in the newly formed Strategic Initiatives Group, which will oversee all external client models, including Whitestone. The room broke into polite applause. I just stared. I was the one who had built that model. I was the one who saved the Whitestone contract from collapse. And now I was being quietly removed from the very project I had created, all under the polite camouflage of restructuring. The CEO smiled. Of course, Mandy's expertise has been invaluable, and she'll continue contributing as senior analyst on the internal logistics optimization team. That was a demotion, a deliberate public one. Jenna glanced at me from across the room, her expression stunned. I just gave a small, controlled nod. Losing composure here would only give them what they wanted, proof that I couldn't handle corporate politics. When the meeting ended, people filed out in silence, offering sympathetic glances but no words. Everyone knew better than to speak up against the CEO. Back at my desk, I stared at the message in my inbox. Effective immediately, you'll report directly to Director Hale. Your focus will shift toward internal system optimization. Please transfer all Whitestone-related materials to Lily's team by end of day. I sat motionless for a long time, rereading the words. After 7 years of building credibility, after fighting tooth and nail to prove that results matter more than connections, I was being sidelined because the CEO couldn't admit his niece had failed. It wasn't just unfair. It was calculated. At 5 p.m., I walked to Lily's new office, my old project files in a neatly organized folder. She was on the phone, laughing softly. The moment she saw me, her expression shifted to one of feigned professionalism. "Thanks for dropping those off," she said, hanging up quickly. "I know this transition must be difficult." I placed the folder on her desk. "It's not difficult," I said evenly. "It's temporary." She raised an eyebrow. "Temporary?" "Yes." I smiled faintly. "Because the one thing you can't restructure is the truth. And that tends to surface, even in a company like this." Her smirk faltered for a split second, but she recovered quickly. "You really think they'll believe you over me?" "My uncle trusts me completely." "Of course he does," I said softly. "That's what makes this so predictable." I turned to leave. "Enjoy the view while it lasts, Lily." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment, staring out at the city lights, replaying every conversation, every file transfer, every email. I kept thinking about the Whitestone data. Months of research, custom algorithms, performance reports. Now sitting in her hands. And then it hit me. The models I'd built weren't static. They relied on a dynamic calibration sequence that required authentication every 2 weeks. An access key tied to my credentials. Without that, the forecasts would gradually degrade, skewing results beyond recognition. I hadn't even done it out of malice. It was a security measure, standard for proprietary client work. But Lily wouldn't know that. And if she started presenting those models as her own, they'd eventually fail. Spectacularly. Still, I didn't want to wait for that. I needed proof. Something irrefutable that showed what she and her uncle were doing. The next morning, I went to IT under the guise of updating my project documentation. Mark, one of the senior techs, greeted me warmly. "Hey, Mandy." "Heard about the shakeup. You okay?" "I'll live," I said. "Actually, I need to make sure my system access logs are clean before I move to the internal team. You know how compliance gets about old projects." He nodded and pulled up my file. "You've still got read-only access to the Whitestone data folder. Everything else has been transferred to Lily's directory. Can you tell who accessed it recently?" He clicked through the logs. Looks like multiple entries from her account last night. Late, around 11:47 p.m. She copied several datasets and exported them to an external device." I felt a flicker of anger. "An external device?" "Yeah, USB drive. But that's odd. We don't normally allow that for client materials." I forced a calm smile. "Thanks, Mark." "You've been a huge help." As I walked out, my heart was pounding. That was it. The proof I needed. She'd copied client-protected data, likely to present as her own again. But exposing her outright would be too easy. And too soon. Number. If Lily wanted to play games with my work, I would let her. Because this time, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to make sure when the truth came out, it destroyed every illusion they'd built. Not just hers, but her uncle's too. And when it happened, no one would be able to rewrite it again. The following week passed in an eerie calm, the kind that only exists right before a storm. Lily was glowing again, leading meetings, taking calls with the Whitestone team, and sending company-wide updates signed Lily Parker, Head of Strategic Initiatives. The CEO made sure to praise her dedication at every opportunity. To anyone watching, it looked like she had redeemed herself, but I knew better. I kept my head down, quietly working from the new internal optimization desk they'd assigned me, a cubicle by the window away from the glass-walled offices I used to sit near. It was humiliating, but it also gave me something valuable: invisibility. And from the shadows, I began preparing. One afternoon, Jenna stopped by my desk with 2 coffees. You look like you haven't slept in a week, she said, sliding one cup toward me. I haven't, I admitted. You ever feel like something's happening behind the scenes and no one wants to say it out loud? She gave me a knowing look. You mean Lily? I nodded. She's presenting Whitestone's quarterly report to the client next Friday. That's supposed to be my work. My model Jenna hesitated, lowering her voice. Then you might want to know this. My friend in marketing overheard her talking about that presentation with the CEO. Apparently, she's promising to unveil an improved algorithm, something she claims she developed herself. A cold, familiar anger settled in my chest. Improved, I repeated quietly. Yeah, Jenna said. And get this. She's planning to stream it live to the entire board. A public showcase. Perfect, I thought. A public stage. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. I pulled up the latest version of the Whitestone model, the one Lily had copied. It was still operating under my original security sequence, meaning in less than 72 hours, it would begin automatically reverting to baseline, producing unstable outputs unless recalibrated with the correct key. If she tried to use it in a live demo, the data would start breaking down right before everyone's eyes. But I didn't want chaos for chaos's sake. I wanted clarity. Proof. I opened a new folder labeled Audit Documentation. Inside, I compiled everything. The original project brief showing my authorship. Email chains confirming Lily's late-night data exports. IT access logs verifying the external device. Time-stamped records of the calibration system tied to my credentials. I wasn't creating drama. I was creating evidence. When it was complete, I encrypted the folder and uploaded it to a private server, one only accessible through a timed email release. If anything happened to me or my account, the file would automatically forward to the compliance department and our Whitestone contact. I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. I'd done my part. Now I just had to wait. Friday arrived faster than I expected. The entire floor buzzed with anticipation. The CEO himself had invited the board and Whitestone's representatives to watch Lily's innovative presentation. Even the CFO looked nervous. This account was the company's crown jewel. Lily floated past my desk in a fitted navy suit, her perfume trailing behind her. Big day, she said, pausing just long enough to add, try to stay positive, Mandy. Change can be hard. I smiled thinly. It sure can. At 10 a.m., the live broadcast began. I watched from the break room with a few analysts who didn't dare attend in person. The large screen displayed the conference room. The CEO at the head, board members lining the table, and Lily standing confidently beside the projection screen. Good morning, everyone, she began smoothly. Today I'll demonstrate a refined version of our volatility and freight forecasting model, one that outperforms traditional predictive tools by nearly 20%. The presentation started perfectly. Charts loaded, slides transitioned flawlessly, her voice steady and controlled. I could see the CEO's approving smile from across the room. Then, about 10 minutes in, the first flicker appeared. A graph on the screen glitched slightly, values shifting erratically. Lily frowned but clicked ahead, pretending not to notice. The next slide loaded, but the numbers didn't make sense. The trend line reversed direction completely. She froze, eyes darting toward her uncle. Murmurs filled the room. Is this live data? One board member asked. Yes, of course, Lily stammered. There must be a minor integration issue. Another graph appeared, this time covered in red error bars. The CEO leaned forward, his face darkening. Why is the output showing a 48% discrepancy? Lily's hands trembled on the clicker. I don't understand. It worked perfectly in testing. I smiled to myself, sipping my coffee. The model hadn't failed. It was simply doing exactly what it was designed to do. Requesting recalibration through the encrypted key only I possessed. Then came the final blow. The live broadcast camera caught Director Hale stepping in to check the console. "Sir," he said to the CEO, his tone sharp. "The authorization key in use belongs to Mandy Rivera. She's the registered developer of this algorithm." The room went silent. The CEO's expression hardened, turning slowly toward Lily. "Would you care to explain that?" Lily stammered something inaudible, her composure unraveling completely as she realized everyone, the board, Whitestone, her uncle, was watching her collapse in real time. And somewhere, deep inside me, something I'd held back for weeks, fear, humiliation, anger, finally let go. I didn't need to say a word. The truth was speaking for itself. When the broadcast ended, my phone buzzed. A message from Director Hale. "Stay near your desk. CEO wants to see you immediately." I closed my laptop, heart steady. It was time to finish what Lily had started. When I entered the CEO's office, the atmosphere felt heavier than I'd ever experienced. The blinds were half drawn, the light muted, and the CEO sat behind his desk, expression carved from stone. Director Hale stood beside him, arms crossed, a stack of papers in his hand. Lily was already there. She looked nothing like the woman who had strutted through the office an hour earlier. Her mascara was smudged and she kept twisting a ring on her finger, her confidence gone. "Sit down, Mandy," the CEO said quietly. I did. The silence stretched so long it felt like the air itself might shatter. Finally, Director Hale spoke. "We've reviewed the system logs. The algorithm used during this morning's presentation was your proprietary model, not the company's revised version. It was accessed from Lily's account without authorization." The CEO turned toward his niece. "Is that true?" Lily swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. "I thought it was company property. I didn't realize—" "Stop," he said sharply. "You had no authorization to use another employee's locked model, nor to copy client datasets onto a personal device." He threw a printed IT report onto the desk. "Do you think we're fools?" She blinked rapidly, tears forming. "Uncle, please, I was only trying to—" "To what?" His voice rose, controlled but cold. "Salvage your reputation after that disaster in the boardroom last month? You've jeopardized the entire Whitestone account." I sat still, my hands folded neatly on my lap. Every instinct screamed for me to gloat, to remind them that they'd ignored me, demoted me, humiliated me. But I didn't. Because revenge isn't about shouting, it's about control. Director Hale cleared his throat. "Mandy," he said, turning to me, "did you intentionally allow this to happen?" "The model failure?" I met his gaze steadily. "No, Director." The calibration simply followed its built-in security cycle. It's designed to require periodic authentication for data integrity. It's standard practice for proprietary algorithms. He nodded slowly, clearly understanding the subtext. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I had simply let the system protect itself. The CEO leaned back in his chair, pressing his fingers together. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" "I knew my model was being used without permission," I said calmly. I trusted that the truth would become obvious eventually. It always does. Lily's face flushed red. "You set me up," she shouted suddenly, pointing at me. "You made me look like a fool in front of the entire board." I didn't raise my voice. "No, Lily. You did that yourself when you stole my work. Again." Her uncle's glare cut her off before she could reply. "Enough," he snapped. "Leave your badge and company devices with security. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending further review." "Uncle, you can't—" "Go." The single word carried more weight than any yelling could. She froze, then stood slowly, tears spilling over. As she walked past me, she whispered, "You'll regret this." But I could tell by her trembling hands that she already did. After she left, the room was silent again. The CEO exhaled heavily, looking suddenly older. "This entire situation has been a disgrace," he muttered. "You should have been promoted months ago." I said nothing. There was nothing satisfying in watching someone realize too late what they'd destroyed. Director Hale placed the reports on the desk. We've spoken with Whitestone. They were watching the broadcast. Their head of analytics requested a direct meeting with you this afternoon, Mandy. They've made it clear. They only want to work with you moving forward. I blinked, caught off guard. They still want to continue the contract? They've extended it, Hale said, smiling faintly, and doubled the budget. Apparently, they value integrity as much as innovation. For a moment, the weight in my chest eased. I nodded slowly. Then I'll make sure they get both. The CEO looked at me, his voice quieter now. You've handled yourself with grace. I can't change what's happened, but I can fix what's next. Effective immediately, I'm reinstating your position and promoting you to head of analytics. The words hung in the air. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. Instead, all I felt was tired. Thank you, I said simply. I appreciate the trust. He nodded once. Go meet with Whitestone. And Mandy? He hesitated. I hope someday you'll believe this company can still be worthy of your loyalty. I didn't answer that. Loyalty, I thought, is earned, not requested. That afternoon, I walked into the conference room where Whitestone's representatives were waiting. Dr. Evans, their head of analytics, greeted me with a firm handshake. We watched everything this morning, he said. Quite a show. I smiled politely. Unintentional, but I'm glad clarity won out. He nodded. We admire your professionalism. In our world, integrity isn't just a buzzword, it's currency. We'd like to expand our partnership under your direct oversight. Of course, I said. That means a lot. When the meeting ended, I stood by the window for a long time, looking out at the skyline. The city was bathed in soft gold light, alive and indifferent. 7 years of quiet work, 1 act of betrayal, and a single question. That's all it had taken to change everything. Revenge hadn't been the goal. Truth had. And maybe that's why it worked. As I packed up my notes, my phone buzzed with a message from Jenna. You did it, everyone's talking. Finally, justice. I smiled faintly and typed back. Justice isn't loud. It's just visible. I turned off the lights and stepped out, the corridor quiet behind me. For the first time in months, my hands weren't shaking. Because this time, I hadn't just survived their lies. I'd rewritten the ending, on my own terms.